I was a Catholic priest, and one disturbing confession haunts me to this day. Before you say it, there's no risk of excommunication for breaking the sacramental seal. I left the church of my own volition in 2013, so I will gladly reveal this unholy confession to you. Besides, I answer first to God, and this sinner was no child of Him. The greatest fright of my life began 12 years ago when an unassuming note was delivered to the rectory. Tonight, 7 p.m. Wait in your confessional. Do not come out. Do not look at me. In retrospect, something was very off about that. But this wasn't the first time a guilty soul had concealed his or her identity before confessing. Usually, however, penitents would perhaps don a shawl or tinted glasses. This was new. He must be unbelievably riddled with shame, I decided, though I did not judge. After all, I still innocently believed I'd heard every crime before adultery, abuse, and even murder, from a convict who had already served his time, but sought to repent, so I granted him that. I have granted absolution to the greatest of sinners, but not this man. At 7 o'clock, I sat and waited in my confessional, a shambly wooden booth with a rotting latticed divider, affording no pretense of discretion or separation between the priest and penitent during the sacrament of penance. Donations from my fellow Irishmen and Irishwomen had kept the lights on, but the church was falling into disrepair. Nevertheless, red drapes shielded the booth doorways. As I listened to the mystery note deliver a stride up the aisle, I hoped he would be appreciative for those curtains veiling his approach from my gaze. Wait in your confessional. Do not come out. Do not look at me. I was respecting his wishes. Was not questioning them nearly as much as would have been apposite. The man opened his curtain, and I kept my eyes down. I glimpsed only the outline of a figure in the light of the church before he drew shut the red fabric behind him. Darkness returned, not that the candles had provided much illumination anyway, and night had fallen beyond the stained glass windows. "Good evening, Father," said the man. "Good evening, my child," I replied. "Are you looking away?" "Yes, my child." "What brings you here today?" "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. This is my first confession. If I'd been a cynical man back then, I would have paid greater attention to the derision and lack of sincerity in his voice. If you feel able, confess." The man exhaled deeply. "I have hurt those who have sinned, Father, and that is my sin." There followed a pause, so I pressed. "Are you comfortable to tell me more?" "I am very comfortable, Father." Now there was more than derision in his voice. There was a bladed edge, which left my arms tingling and brought about my first twinge of fear. "Do not worry about me, my child," I said. "I am here not to judge, but to absolve you. Please, if you feel able, continue." There was the sardonic tone again. "You see, my sin is that I'm not like you, holy man. I don't seek sinners to absolve them, and I don't hurt him as some sort of retributive justice. No, I'm a taker, Father. I eat shame. Heavens, does it taste good? Don't you think so?" He was clearly an unwell man, but not the first to have entered my booth. I think you have done the right thing by coming here today. I would like to pray for you." "Oh my God, help your child." "I'm not his child," said the man coldly. There it was again, that extra-earthly blade slashing my arms. Only, this time it felt like more than a psychological phenomenon. I examined my skin frantically, but found no marks. Found no knife working through me. None of this was right. For the first time in my life, I did not feel God's presence in that church. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I eventually continued, voice fragile as I wrestled with the wrongness of the man on the other side of my booth. "With God's grace, I pray you find penance, absolution, and a life without sin. But I don't want absolution, Father. I'm confessing for the crake of it, don't you know? Most of all, I don't want to stop hurting sinners. Sinners like you." That unseen knife tore into me again, and I looked down a second time. That twinge of fear blossomed into terror, the likes of which I have never felt before. Terror so paralyzing that I managed not even a whimper. The blade was not imaginary. A growing pool of blood stained the inner sleeves of my black cassock, and I rolled them up to reveal gashes running the length of my forearms. Gashes still being cut by that spectral weaponry. I had long believed in miracles, but this was an abomination. The man cried out with laughter. "Oh, absolution. I feel it in me bones." "Grand, so it is. Thanks be to God. Here, what about you, Father? Have you confessed?" That question cut nearly as sharp at the blade, and I ignored it, clawing at my bleeding arms as fresh wounds were forged by that invisible blade. I fell to my knees and considered lifting my head to look up at the lattices. Considered looking at the... "I wouldn't be doing that if I were you, Father," warned the man blessed or cursed with psychic perception. "What are you? The devil? No devil here, Father. No God. Nothing and no one to absolve you. I told you that's not what I do." "Then what do you do?" "I eat shame," he growled. "Now confess, or I shall make things so much more terrible for you." Lifting my bloody hands to cover my eyes, I gave the man what he wanted. "Oh my God, for I have sinned," I began. I was 8 years old. Rayona was my first love, but she liked Finley, not me. I knew as much when he broke his arm, and she drew a love heart on his plaster cast. I was envious, so I spread a rumor that Rayona had kissed Finley behind the bicycle shed. Gossip was a dangerous thing in my small village. She and her family had to move away because folks started treating Im cruelly. They called her the worst things. "Little Hure," the man said. "And Finley was the Hure fucker." "How do you know that?" This penitent wasn't some former classmate of mine. I knew that from the wounds supernaturally inflicted on my arms. I whispered, "Ask me that once more, Father, and I'll pull back that red curtain to show you. But I won't like that, trust me. It's for your sake. Finish the story." I blubbered. I always blamed Connor and San for what came next. They said Finley needed to be put in his place for taking your girl, not that she'd ever been mine. Connor told Finley it was a shame his arm had healed, because injuries win the girls. So my two friends took their penknives and started cutting into both his arms. Cutting and cutting and cutting whilst he begged for them to stop. "And what did you do, Father?" I was becoming too light, headed to speak, or even cry. I absolved myself of blame. I wasn't holding the knife, after all. But I still let them do what they did, and maybe even enjoyed it, because I hated Finley. That's my greatest sin. At long last, the gashing of my flesh ceased. I would have leapt for joy, but I was too weak. Too close to losing consciousness. "Despite all that, I think I'm going to die anyway," I lamented. The man laughed. "Your sin and guilt drove you to become a holy man, didn't it? Look at you, Father, a sinner cleansing sinners. Wef, we are all sinners. I absolve thee, sinner." The man mocked. "I'll be leaving now. Blessed be you, Father, for tonight's meal. Your guilt, your delectable disgrace. It was divine. Now, I pray you tend to your wounds quickly, should the Lord see fit." I heard his curtain draw back as I lay in a foetal position, eyeing the bottom of my own red curtain. A slither of light was visible at one side, cut off momentarily by a shade cast from the figure exiting the booth. I was tempted once more to peek. "No," the man advised. "Farewell." As he walked away, all seemed safe. I fumbled for the phone in my trouser pocket, below the cassock, to call an ambulance. But there was one final statement, one final terror. "Until we meet again, Father." This is going to be long, and I'd like to go ahead and add a trigger warning for traumatic birth. I am still in therapy for PTSD over 2 years later because of how traumatic my son's birth was. I was only 30 weeks along when I started hemorrhaging in my kitchen. My husband was hundreds of miles away for his cousin's wedding. I was supposed to go too, but backed out because I wasn't feeling well. I insisted he still go because he and his cousin are best friends and he was in the wedding. I didn't know what to do, so I called my friend who lives nearby and she rushed me to the ER. On the way, I started to lose consciousness. When I got to the ER, the nurse wasn't taking me too seriously and sent me to sit down and wait. It wasn't until my friend yelled at them to do something that they came over to find me bleeding out on the floor. I'd never seen that much blood before. Another person waiting in the ER had actually started to pray over me. They finally rushed me back and my blood pressure was off the charts. We're talking 220 to 120. I could feel myself slipping away. I could feel the blood rush out of my body with every heartbeat. I begged them to check on my baby. I had no idea if he was okay. They found his pulse, but it was dwindling. I was rushed to a hospital with an OR in an ambulance. I lost control of my bladder and urinated all over the stretcher. It was horrifying to just lose control of your faculties like that. Once in the hospital, I was immediately taken in for an emergency SHE section. No time for an epidural, so they put a nerve blocker in my spine. I don't know what went wrong, but it hurt so much I screamed. It felt like my whole nervous system lit up like a Christmas tree. My husband was on the phone with the doctor the whole time, but otherwise I was alone and scared and dying. They got my son out, and at first he didn't make any sounds and wasn't moving. Finally, I heard him whimper, and the nurses told me he would be okay, but needed to get to another hospital right away that had a NICU. I only saw him for about 30 seconds before he was rushed away. He only weighed 3 pounds. He was so tiny. I was so scared. I was told they found a blood clot the size of a softball, and it had pushed the placenta off the wall of my uterus, which caused the hemorrhage. I had already been at risk for eclampsia and had done everything the doctors told me, but it didn't stop eclampsia for setting in. I was rushed to the ICU, where I was given magnesium to bring down my blood pressure and prevent a stroke. The magnesium was horrible. It gave me a migraine for 3 days and made me feel like my skin was on fire. I was so thirsty but couldn't drink anything without throwing up. My parents drove about 3 hours and made it there shortly after my son was born, and my husband had taken the first flight he could find and arrived a bit later. I was able to be transferred to the hospital where my son was the next day. The same ambulance driver from the night before took me, and she kept telling me how relieved she was to see me. Once I got to the new hospital, I asked to use the bathroom. 2 nurses helped me to the toilet, and when I had finished, I went to stand up and had a seizure. I hit my head on the floor and woke up surrounded by medical staff. They advised I'd had a seizure, but I don't remember a lot of what happened after this, only that I woke up the next morning with more magnesium drip and was hooked up to all kinds of machines. I had to have 2 blood transfusions as well. I finally got to have the magnesium drip removed and started feeling better, but then that night while I was asleep, my blood pressure spiked again and they had to put me back on the magnesium. The worst part was not being able to see my son this whole time. It would be 4 days before I could be wheeled up to see him. It broke my heart. When I did get to see him, though, he was so tiny and hooked up to so many machines. All I wanted to do was hold him, but it would still be a while before I'd be able to. When I finally could, it was the best feeling in the world. He snuggled under my chin and fell asleep on my chest. The next day, my husband wheeled me back up to see my son again. While I was visiting, I needed to use the restroom, so my husband helped me. As I sat on the toilet, I felt something strange and looked down. I was bleeding profusely from my C-section wound. Once again, I was surrounded by doctors and medical staff. Turns out some of the stitches had come open. They weren't sure why. I have a theory that maybe they had loosened when I was throwing up repeatedly that first night. I had to be patched back up with heavy-duty medical-grade tape until they could figure out what was going on. I got a CT scan to see how deep the stitches had come undone. Turns out pretty deep. I was told it would take months of having the wound packed and unpacked every day before it would heal. and hopefully this would prevent me from having to get a wound vac. After all this, I had to take a psych evil, which I failed. As you could imagine, I was in a dark place and was a little too honest. I live in a state where you can be forcibly held if they think you may hurt yourself, so I was put on watch for 3 days, basically around the clock. After that, I was reevaluated and given the okay, all I spent about 3 weeks in the hospital. My son had to be there for 2 months. Going back and forth to see him was excruciating for me because of my wound, and being at home without him was even worse. I was unable to breastfeed, even though I could produce milk, but just know enough because my body had been through so much. This was a major gut punch to me. During the time he was in the Nenkua, a hurricane came through and flooded his nursery. I was so broken at this point. My husband fixed and cleaned up everything, and he packed and unpacked my wound in between at-home nurse visits. I never could have gotten through any of this without him. Now my son is a sweet and happy 2-year-old little boy with boundless energy, and he's my everything. I'm so proud of him. He also fought like hell. I'm doing better as well. I go to a therapist that specializes in birth trauma, and I started taking mood stabilizers. It's helped, but I still have flashbacks and nightmares sometimes. I've developed a fear of dying and worry. I've become a hypochondriac. My pre-existing diagnosed OCD has worsened a lot. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel like my old self again. I love my son more than anything, and we had planned on having one more, but not now. It's sad to have that choice taken away, but I know it's best for our family. My college roommate and I used to get drunk together a lot. She had a really dark history, and she'd sometimes drunkenly tell me a lot about it, as well as how fucked up it had made her. She had been the one to find her father after he killed himself, and one of her uncles assaulted her all through childhood. She had a major eating disorder. Once we went to see a movie loaded drunk, and she threw up in her popcorn and tried to convince me it wasn't a big deal and we didn't have to leave because she would have just thrown it up later anyways. I had to practically carry her home. She abused laxatives constantly and would mix fiber supplements in with her alcohol. She was also tremendously abusive to her partners and tried to manipulate me into feeling bad about myself occasionally, which was the main reason I stopped being her friend and moved out after not even a full year of living with her. A few years after I had stopped living with her, she called a mutual friend of ours drunkenly while he was hanging out with me, saying she was drunk on the side of the road. I told him he could go pick her up and bring her back here if he wanted. Turns out she was with her fiancé the whole time, and they were on the side of the road because a friend of theirs was trying to hit on her. She kept drunkenly talking about how this friend was into her and how surprising it was, and trying to get us to reaffirm that this girl had a crush on her, and going over and over all the things that indicated this girl wanted to fuck her, all in front of her fiancé, who was just quietly sitting there looking incredibly uncomfortable. At one point, she actually got to the point where she was asking, "Why shouldn't I date X name?" And I just bluntly said, I don't know, because you're fucking engaged to someone else. Her fiancé was just sitting there, right beside her, the whole time, and going over and over all the things that indicated this girl wanted to fuck her, all in front of her fiancé, who was just quietly sitting there looking incredibly uncomfortable. At one point, she actually got to the point where she was asking, "Why shouldn't I date X name?" And I just bluntly said, I don't know, because you're fucking engaged to someone else. Her fiancé was just sitting there, right beside her, the whole time. It was at this point that our mutual friend suggested he drive them both home. Probably he could tell I was a bit upset on behalf of the fiancée. When her fiancé tried to help her get up and get her shoes on, she started CCREMING at her not to touch her, clawing at her arm with her long nails, saying that she wanted our mutual friend to do it because she loved him, and talking to him about how they could have a beautiful future together. I'll never forget her fiancé's expression as she followed her down the stairs to get in our mutual friend's car. She was livid. She was mouthing to herself because she clearly didn't feel like she could stand up to her. They kept dating for at least 3 years after that. A couple of the fiancé's friends even told me they had set up an emergency signal in case she ever decided to get out. In the end, it took moving to a different province and getting her career on track before she finally ended things. I have no idea where the original person is now or what she is doing. Last I heard, she was briefly hospitalized for something liver-related at 26 years old because of how hard she's treating her body. Even though she seems like such a spiteful and manipulative person, I honestly can only feel sorry for her because I know it's because of her really fucked up past. I hope she gets help someday. So, recently I have done something wrong, and I think it's about time that I confess. Now my reasons for doing what I did could probably be considered understandable by most. But that doesn't make what I did any less terrible. Here we go. So a while back I had met this really cute guy. I had never believed in it before, but this was without a doubt love at first sight. He was perfect in every way, his smile, his hair, his quirky outfit, and most of all, his personality. This man had to be the most charismatic guy I have ever met. So anyway, I saw him sitting on a bench in the park drawing a picture of a bird nest up in the tea. I've never done this before, but I literally went up to him and just said hello. I know that doesn't sound like a big deal for most people, but it is for me. We started talking and we instantly hit it off. It was as if we were perfect for each other. Right as I was about to leave, I asked him if I would be able to find him here again tomorrow. Sadly, he said he only goes there on Saturday. So I guess I would just have to wait until next week if I wanted to see him again. I spent the entire week obsessing over this man. I just couldn't get over him. I was without a doubt in love. I started to imagine what a future with him would be like. I would walk around my house pretending like he was there, having conversations with him, even serving him breakfast. I finally decided on Saturday I would ask him to marry me. So, I arrived at the park at around noon. I drove there because I didn't want to potentially lose any time that could be spent staring into his dreamy eyes. I walked towards the bench, and what I saw shocked me. He was cheating on me. That's right, he was sitting right there kissing another woman. I was outraged. I walked over and shouted at him in fury. How dare you do this to me? We were supposed to get married. But apparently you would run off with this filthy bitch. He just stared at me with this look of confusion on his face, like he had no idea what he did wrong. This made me outraged. I walked back to my car fuming. I got in and decided it was time for revenge. I stepped on the gas pedal and went crashing through the gate. My windshield was smashed by the gate, and I could feel a piece of glass embedded above my eyebrow. I drove through the park sending a trash can flying, and then I saw the bench. I sped towards it and he and his slut bitch began to run, but I was faster. I ran right into them. And I heard the screams of terror, and I saw the blood fly everywhere, and I saw his head separate from his body and land right on my lap, all in slow motion. I stopped the car. I looked at his blood-covered head sitting right in my lap. I began to chuckle, to laugh out loud. Soon enough I started laughing hysterically. Revenge was fun. In fact, it felt great. Why am I confessing and feeling bad about this? This was the greatest day of my life. I should do this to all the fools out there who have wronged me. And I mean all of them, you included. Unfortunately, this is about me. I told a friend, and they were pretty creeped out about it, and I'm quite embarrassed of it, really. I've never done it again, and it's really changed the way I talk to people online. My Reddit account has some very easy to follow steps to find out who I am, so I only post positive things, very tame critiques, and that's about it. My account has my name that I share with a lot of other things, previous online accounts, etc. But my story is about how I cyberstalked a BF3 hacker just because he was being annoying. When BF3 became free to play, I joined a TDM server. I have quite a few hours on BF3 300th Live, and I really enjoyed it. To see a full server again was quite fun, and I was kicking ass. Then this guy joins. This guy starts kicking ass, heading-shotting me from across the map. I don't think too much of it, but I ask, "Hey man, is that all skill?" He responds it is, and he's streaming. BF3 isn't a very popular game, so it took less than a minute to find his Twitch stream. Just look for a picture of the same map being played, and his was the first, clearly hacking. Boxes on screen, snapping headshots, the whole 9 yards. So now I had his stream. I called it out in game, linked the stream, and he left, was booted a minute later. In that minute he was joking about how, as the game was free, he could just get another account and keep going. On his stream he wasn't talking, but he was typing. He was typing to another streamer. Now his stream just had me as a viewer. I was pretty bored and he had my attention. He hadn't really ruined my gaming experience, it was just, who is this Dutch? His Twitch name matched his Twitter name, which he used to promote his stream. His Twitter was filled with bullied or trolling posts at people, and he was just a smarmy docha bag. No photos though. His name was included, but it wasn't a very unique name. Now I have a Twitter account and a name. This is where it gets even worse. I start to troll his posts. Going back months, I find a post that links him to a town. I Google search the town and his name, bingo. A post about Australia Day and how he thought this town had put on a really bad show, just saying how bad it was at sea and trolling people in the comments. It was a small town and people were biting? You should organize it if you think you're so great at. He was eating it up, but I had his Facebook. Start looking into his profile. Posts were private, but the Facebook URL closely matched the Twitter, so I knew it was him. The profile pics were nondescript, banned pages, random shit like that. But this guy had a girlfriend, her profile was public and she kept tagging him in posts. It was so cringy. "I love you, boo. You are my world, the most beautiful girl I know. etc." The guy and his girlfriend were two ham planets. He was the epitome of keyboard warrior. He had a fedora wearing lens flare edited profile picture. It was actually just perfect. It was just so satisfying that this guy was the stereotype personified. I could have left it there, but I had to go a step further. I created another Twitch account just to let the guy know I found him. I posted his Facebook details in the chat of Twitch. There was like max 4 people watching him stream, but you could see it pop up on his stream chat. Him pause mid-game and just not do anything for like 5 seconds. He closed the stream,